Thank you for joining us. Today I have Ted Harrington. He's the executive partner of Independent Security Evaluators. It's a subject matter that I think a lot of you that are listening and watching this will deeply relate to. So, Ted, thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Hope I can help.
Good. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, your company, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Like we mentioned, my name's Ted Harrington. I'm one of the owners of a security consulting and security research company called Independent Security Evaluators. And to be clear, we're talking about information security here, as opposed to, say, physical security, which is obviously very relevant to all of you out there listening to this podcast. Companies come to us when they're building an application or some sort of system, and they have a bunch of problems they're trying to solve. And those problems are things like they need to understand their security vulnerabilities, they need to find them, they need to fix them, and they need to understand and reduce risk so that they can turn around and communicate how secure their solution is to their customers or their external stakeholders, their board, whatever. And we do that through security assessments, what some people might call penetration testing, but that's a whole other ball of wax. That term is actually an incorrect term in many ways, but that's essentially the service that we're doing. So there's a variety of things that you can do right away. The first thing that I always recommend is the thing that is often overlooked, and that's getting your mind right. So what that means is to be successful in understanding and defending against your adversaries, you actually need to think like them. You need to literally try to think like an attacker. And that piece of advice, essentially what it means is don't think like a defender. Don't think like a normal person. Think like the person you're trying to defend against. And essentially how you do that is the normal person, the average person, tries to understand what the rules are so they can follow them. But what an attacker does is they try to understand what the rules are so they can break them. And so that mindset shift, that applies to everything about how you're building your system, including things like trying to understand what it is that you think the users of the system will do, and then investigating, well, what if they did something different? What if they did the opposite? What if they did something that you did not expect? And exploring those lines of thought, that's where you find a lot of the issues that exist, because when you're building something, you're not necessarily thinking about breaking it. So that's the first most critical thing, is to just change your mindset, to start having a little bit more of that adversarial and malicious perspective.
Love that. So it's interesting. There's a lot of parallels because you think about it. So in the physical security space like that we're in, it strikes me as a conversation around allowing for curiosity and allowing for critical thinking and exploring. There's probably a lot of testing and trying things and experimentation that has to be, in that. So allowing for the space for that to happen is probably critical into properly building. It's not just about developing the tool, whatever it may be, and then getting it out. You have to actually allow space for there to be some of those things that you talk about.
I mean, think of it this way, right? Security is actually a critical part of the development process. Whatever you're building, security needs to be part of that process. And that's actually pretty counter to the way that most things are built today. Most organizations build things with the mindset where they say, let's build it, let's get it out in the marketplace, let's see how the market reacts, let's start making money, and then we can come back and revisit security and we can secure it after. There's so many problems with that line of thinking. The biggest problem is the one that actually hurts the most, which is that makes your life so much harder. Because when you find the issues later of the thing that you already built, it takes exponentially more effort, more time, more money to fix those problems. And in some cases, you might not be able to fix it at all, just because it might be so fundamental to the way the thing is designed that the only solution would be to completely start over. And we have a customer right now who is having that hard conversation. We're having that with them, where there's some fundamental flaws in the way that it's built, that really the only solution, other than just stop being in the business they're in, is to start from scratch. And that's incredibly hard for an entrepreneur, for a developer, for anybody to hear, to say, start over. I just spent however many years doing this thing. I don't want to do that. So it's hard to fix it. It's less effective doing it that way. It's more expensive. But if instead you're thinking about security each step of the process as you're building the thing, you're starting with the requirements. What does it need to do? Who does it need to do it for? What is the outcome you're looking to achieve? Those are all security questions too. And as you implement the security questions into those building questions, what you're going to wind up doing is finding out that it's actually fairly easy to think about security as you're building, and it will avoid all of those nightmare problems for you down the road. It's never too early to think about security, and it's also never too late to think about security. And what I mean by that is that I would never want someone to feel disincentivized to, in that exact moment, start working on security. So my counsel to everyone listening to this podcast right now would be, right now, the call to action to you when you stop this recording is to go start working on security wherever you are. Now, hopefully that means you're earlier in the process, so you're going to feel less pain. But if you are in the majority of people who are saying, oh, we're going to build first and then we're going to try to bolt security on later, your life's harder, but you still can go get it. Don't say, hey, this is going to suck for me, so I'm just not going to do it.
Fair. That's good advice. And I guess from a company like yourself, typical engagement that you have with an organization, is it through a certain department, a certain type of person? Do you work across disciplines? Like, what is the typical engagement that you have with a company?
So generically speaking, the person who has the problem that we're best aligned to solve is the person who is responsible for this solution being secure. So the person who, if there's an issue, the buck stops with them. The person who has to make the case to their boss, the CFO, whoever, that they need to invest in this. Now, in the large enterprises that we work with, that is sometimes someone like the VP of engineering or the VP of security or whatever their title might be. And in smaller, more startup oriented organizations, that might be the CTO. It might even be the CEO. So I answer that intentionally by not saying the title, because it really depends on your company, but it's really the responsibility of whoever has to make sure that this thing at the end of the day is not going to be popped and then wind up in the headlines of the next breach.
Yeah, which is never good. A question on your company itself. So, what separates you or differentiates you from, other people that are in type of your business? What makes you all special?
That's a great question. One of the big problems that exists in security today is that there's such an emphasis on trying to minimize the effort, minimize the expertise, and to automate things. And normally those sound like really good things, right? How do we make it easier, faster? How do we automate? Like, did I just say those were bad things? Those are inherently themselves not bad. But what's happening in the world today is that everyone is trying to do those things and stop there. And almost all security that we see out there is like that, is essentially going and finding some sort of tool that can scan something to say, hey, here's some common issues, and go fix those common issues. But the stuff that really matters, the hard stuff, that takes a level of effort and a level of expertise that very few organizations have. And we've been doing this since 2005, and we've been behind research of things like, we started the idea of what is now car hacking before car hacking was even a thing. And we built a weaponized software radio to start a Ford Escape without the authentic key. We look at all kinds of IoT devices. We run a big hacking contest around a thing that's called IoT Village. We've found exploits in medical devices. And we're doing all of these things because what we do is we think like an attacker. Many organizations don't do that. We apply this very manual approach to it. Many organizations don't do that. And fundamentally, what we're trying to do is help our customers solve their problems. And too much security out there today is trying to frame the problem as something that is easily solved. And I'm the guy in the corner being like, hey, this is hard. This is not easy. And that's one of the big things that really makes us different.
Very cool. Well, I appreciate it. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do so?
Well, you can shoot me an email. My email is pretty easy. It's just ted@ise.io. And as you mentioned before, following me on LinkedIn is definitely a great thing too. I'm super active. I pretty much reply to every single message that I ever get, every comment. And I think it's a great way to build community. So one of those two would be a good way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, I can second the fact you do respond and you are active, and it's usually really good information. And I've noticed the network around you is quite interesting as well. So I've learned a lot from them as well. So it's a classic case of the people that you surround yourself with that you can tell are very interesting. So thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I wanted the community within the access control world to hear from an expert like yourself on this. So I think we accomplished that. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Absolutely. My pleasure. However I can help.
Thank you.